Good morning, everyone, and welcome. This is episode 25 of Snowed, the Michael Snow is a Fraud story. So, if you recall back in episode, I believe 22, I was speaking about Corey's TikToks, and that I had taken some photos, and one of them was Mr. Snow on a motorcycle, and that another woman had taken it, and it was taken in front of her home. Well, I also told you that I had reached out to this woman and that I hadn't heard back, but guess what? I've heard back. So we had a delightful little chat last night, and she has given me permission to share her story or, snippets. I'm not going to tell everything because it was a very lengthy conversation back and forth. And but there are some snippets of our conversation that I am going to share, and she has given me permission. Again, I'm not going to reveal who she is. So here we go. And I just checked back, and that was episode 23 that I saw the motorcycle picture. Anyway, she says, "Hi, Shelley. I am following along with your videos. Yes, I was briefly in touch with Mike. I believe it was in July of 2021. I'm glad you reached out. I wanted to tell the police after I met him. Most of all, I wanted to talk to you about this. I'm sorry I was involved for a brief period of time with him and any hurt it may have caused you. I apologize." So sweet. I mean, every single one of these women has apologized to me. And you know what? There's no need. Nobody needs to be apologizing to anybody except for Mr. Snow. This is all on him. I hold no ill will towards any one of these women that was involved. As a matter of fact, I am so proud to be your face. So she goes on to say, first of all, for your safety, he uses the cameras on your house to watch who comes and goes from your home. He also listens to your conversations. If you haven't changed the access code so he can't access them, please change it. Now, isn't that great? Yeah, she's confirmed that, in fact, those cameras were not for my safety. They were for him to keep tabs on me. Abuse. Definite abuse. Oh, and just so you know, his cameras, that every single camera that was attached to this house is completely gone. My kids ripped those cameras down and installed new ones. So yeah, I have my own cameras. I know who's coming and going now. So she says, I went on 2 afternoon trips to Regina with him, one to the Harley Davidson store where he decided to purchase a green and white bike. He said the two of you picked it up the next day and went for a ride. Well, I guess that's the Harley that he had somebody else finance for him, and it was blue and white, but whatever. He really likes to pretend he's a bigwig. He also doesn't have a motorcycle license, LOL. Actually, I discovered this too as we were packing his things and moving him out of my house. I did discover that he had actually taken a beginner's motorcycle course in Saskatchewan. And so that was a little laughable because he had told me he did have a motorcycle license. She says she went once to Chapters to buy his magazines. Again, I told you, he's a magazine hoarder. He loves magazines. These lasted a couple of hours each. I did an overnight Calgary trip and a very long 10-day Toronto trip. I had never been east, so I went. He went to visit Karen and left me in a hotel for the evening when we got to Toronto. Another woman he leaves sitting someplace. Then he called a lady to come visit him at the hotel. I can't remember her name, but they had been friends for a very long time. After a little bit of discussion with this lady, I threw a few names out, and it decidedly was the same woman that I believe he was in a relationship with. If you recall, I had mentioned that back already when after the assault, blah, 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 he went back to Toronto. And yes, that would be the same woman. So this snippet, she says, next morning he had to meet with Karen again. Then we went sightseeing in the country. Next day was a music store for hours, telling stories and smooching the sale clerk. Let me say it was painful. He didn't buy anything, thank God, as I would have had to endure the torture of listening to him try and play it after he drank his 26 of whiskey. Not kidding. I'm not the only one that's telling you he's drinking a 26 of whiskey a night. And yes, you saw the musical instruments. He thought he was, a professional musician at one point. I think it was 2 or 3 nights in Toronto, then a stop in Winnipeg at another lady's house for a couple of days. A child psychologist. Now, this would be lastly. I couldn't understand why she couldn't see through him and his antics. Isn't that the truth? I mean, so much education. But again, we are all well-educated, intelligent women. And it's not so much that, it's the kindness, it's the compassion, it's our empathy that he gets us with. So I believe, I'm not sure if this was the same trip. I think it's a different trip because it's a different direction now. And she says on the way home, he stopped at Swift Current in some motel for the night. He had invited Cindy to join us for the evening. Now, I do not believe this is the same Cindy I've been talking about. I believe this is a completely different woman. We had a little chat, and Cindy that I was talking about lives in Whitewood. This one is Swift Current. That's quite a ways away. So this is not the same Cindy. This is a completely different woman. So he invited Cindy to join us for the evening. From Swift Current the next morning, he proceeded to tell me in a non-direct way how he hustles his companies, that he gets investors to put in the money to start the company, opening more businesses, transferring businesses into those businesses, and closing some. So there is a workload, a load of business paperwork that is endless and hard to trace. Red flag. So I may have these a little mixed up, but here is this. She talks again about the Toronto trip. The Toronto trip was full of you sending pictures. Yes, he made a huge point of showing me. Now, let me just tell you, I am not, I'm not a huge selfie taker like Mr. Snow, but I know for a fact that any of the other women can attest, he likes to request photos. Let me see you. I think that anybody who's watching that has had any interaction with Mr. Snow will recognize that phrase. Let me see you. So he does often request that I would please send me some pictures. I want to see you. I miss you so much. So I see very clearly now what he was doing was setting the stage for me to look desperate, because she says, also telling me how desperate and insecure you get when he does these long trips. So he's saying I'm desperate and insecure, and also trying to make her jealous, I believe. You were going through some lady part troubles. And the two of you hadn't been having sex because of it. I mean, honestly, the stuff he comes up with is just it's incredible to me. This is where I found out that the two of you were still living together. Red flag. Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I do know that, I'm a secretary, I'm a housekeeper. So he's told a lot of women a lot of different things about who I was, a cousin, lots and lots of different stories. So then she goes on to say to me, when you would call him, he would tell me to be quiet and not make noise because it was you calling. Red flag. But she was stuck. What could she do? She was stuck on this trip with him. She also points out he was also receiving texts of naked pictures from many women every morning. Some called and he chatted with them. None of this comes as any surprise to me. So she did tell me how he sort of, scammed her, manipulated her, I guess would be the better word, into paying for some of his things. And she said, I didn't appreciate that, and I didn't pay for any more of his stuff. I paid for mine, and that's it. I did buy supper one evening in Toronto for the two of us. Total value I'm out is approximately $260, which I was expecting to at least pay on this trip, so not a big deal. 26s of whiskey straight every night before he'd go to sleep, absolutely shit-faced. Shows of him trying to play something on his instrument, failing miserably. Been there, done that. It was horrible. I got home and I didn't talk to him again. Then he called a few months later to tell me he was sober and had lost some weight. That didn't happen. He's not ever been sober. He wanted to be with me. I replied with, I want nothing to do with you or your bullshit, and don't call me again. As well, she says at the end, make sure my profile pic and name are blacked out. Absolutely, sister, absolutely. Mike doesn't have anything on me other than where I live. He also has told me he has done this throughout Canada, Vancouver, Medicine Hat, Calgary, Manitoba, and Toronto. When things get too hot in one place, he moves on to another place to start his behavior up again. Yeah, this is very typical. So what I want to say to you, Mr. Snow, is I know you know who I'm talking about. Don't you dare reach out to this woman, because the police are just waiting for one more thing on you as well. This video is, this whole TikTok series is my video statement for the police. So they would just love to have you contact her.